Today, we are chatting about a tree that rarely needs an introduction, and that is the ever popular Crape Myrtle. I'm going to tell you guys all about it and share with you a few of my favorite varieties. Let's go. Lagerstroemia indica, commonly known as Crape Myrtle, is among the most widely used tree for the landscape, and it's not hard to see why. This tree has so many incredible attributes. I'm going to tell you guys all about it. And we're also going to go over some design tips and uses for this tree as well. And lastly, I will share some of the problems associated with the Crape Myrtle, disease, pests, all that stuff. So research will show you that most varieties of crepe myrtles are best in USDA zones 7 through 9, but I've also seen them thrive just perfectly fine in zone 10, and some varieties can also go as low as zone 6 and get down to about -10 degrees Fahrenheit. So a really geographically diverse tree. And in the cool season, they will lose their leaves, and they do give you some pretty nice fall color. The tree typically ranges from a mature height of about 15 to 20 feet tall up to about 30 feet. They're incredibly drought tolerant once they establish a good root system. Now, they do need full sun to reach their full flowering potential. With that said, I've seen some planted in partial shade conditions, and they do okay, they just won't give you that full flowering effect. Crepe myrtles are also very deer resistant and air pollution tolerant. They generally want to be pruned in late winter or early spring. Before that, nice new growth emerges. Now, definitely the most notable attribute of the crepe myrtle is the incredible blooms it produces. And some of them flower so densely and vibrantly that it looks like the tree's on fire, that it's just exploding with color. Colors range from bright white all the way through to deep rich reds and magentas and pinks. And these trees will start showing some blooms around July and peak around August generally, then continue through most of September. And not only are the blooms incredibly showy, it's one of the longest blooming trees, which is one of the main reasons why this tree is so popular. One of my favorite varieties is Lagerstroemia tuscarora. It has a beautiful, vibrant pink and is also resistant to powdery mildew, which makes it usable coastally. This variety is used widely down here in Southern California for its incredible beauty and disease-resistant attributes. And right up there with the Tuscarora variety is the Natchez variety. This is a bright white flowering crepe myrtle that gets loads of blooms. And if you're planting a landscape with other trees and shrubs, the white bloom just kind of goes with everything. And if you have a white trim on your house, this is a really nice tree to complement that. A third variety I love is called Muskogee. It's sort of a pale lavender flower color, and again, this tree blooms profusely, and it's such a head turner when it's at its peak. Now, these trees can either be purchased as a single trunk, often referred to as standard, or a multi-trunk. Now, which one should you get? It ultimately depends on how the tree will be used and where it will be placed. Cities love the crepe myrtle. They love it for its great attributes, and you see it fairly often in medians or sidewalks. And in these locations, cities will generally specify single trunk trees. And that's because it allows for people and traffic to flow around them easily, as opposed to a multi-trunk where you have the possibility of a pedestrian walking by and, bumping their head on a limb, or a big truck coming by and taking out a branch of the tree. The multi-trunk variety usually does need a little bit wider space to fit in. So if you have limited space, a single trunk tree might be your best bet. But if you do have the space, there is nothing like a multi-trunk specimen strategically placed as the centerpiece of a yard or landscape. It can just be absolutely breathtaking. I love the trunk structure. I love the uniqueness of it, especially when they're lit up at night. They can create such an ambiance to the landscape. And I do have a video on single trunk versus multi-trunk tree. I'm gonna link that video right at the top so you can grab more info on that. Now, another notable characteristic of the crepe myrtle is the exfoliating bark that it produces. The bark is really smooth. It has sort of a multi-toned appearance as outer layers start to peel off, creating a really cool and unique look. Just a wonderful added bonus there. Now for design uses, this tree does really well for flanking an entry. Because they have a predictable growth, they create a really nice symmetry to use as an entry focal point. And because of the symmetrical quality, they're great to use in a linear fashion, kind of leading your eye down a walkway or a public right-of-way. Again, they're very commonly used as a street tree. They're super hardy and can kind of take that rougher urban environment, if you will. And this attribute also translates it to being highly used in parkways and curb strips. They do great there in those higher traffic areas where there might be air pollution, people constantly traversing across the root system. They can definitely take that abuse. Now, crepe myrtles can also grow large enough where it can be used as a shade tree. In time, they can get big enough to put a small table and chairs under, and properly placed trees can keep sunlight out of living room windows, and it can cast some nice shade on a house and keep it a bit cooler. But generally, they're considered a smaller accent tree. Now, there is no perfect tree in the world, and the crepe myrtle is no exception to that. There definitely are a few downsides. First off, it can be susceptible to garden pests like aphids and scale. It's a fairly common problem with crepe myrtles, and they would need to be treated if this does occur. And these trees can also be susceptible to powdery mildew. But getting back to one of the varieties that I love, the Tuscarora variety, this does have a higher tolerance to powdery mildew. And that's one reason why this particular variety is used so much throughout Southern California here, because it can take some coastal conditions and that marine layer that might come in. Another common issue that you might face with the crepe myrtle is its root system. It's nowhere near as invasive as some other trees like ficus, but there can be some invasive surface rooting as the tree ages. So over time, these trees do have the potential to cause some cracking in nearby concrete and potentially engulfing irrigation lines. So just be aware of that if you are planning a new landscape. But all in all, the roots are not too bad when you compare them with lots of other trees. Now, maintenance can also be a bit of an issue as well. The tree does tend to grow at a moderate to semi-fast rate, which requires a fairly significant degree of pruning. To keep them looking really nice, I recommend to give them a selective pruning once a year, just to kind of keep them a little bit more lacy and open and airy, not let them get too dense, but definitely don't let them go more than a couple years. Otherwise, it's going to start to potentially look unruly. And lastly, even though the flowers are incredibly gorgeous, they do have the potential to stain nearby concrete if it gets stepped on or rolled over by a vehicle or something. So just be aware of where you're planting the tree or where you're putting your hardscape. If the tree is already planted, the flowers do have the potential to stain. I'm gonna link another tree up top that you can click on as an alternative to the crepe myrtle if you do wish to see another option. And that is it for the crepe myrtle. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, guys, on yet another video. I hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I will try to get to everybody and answer questions and comments. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you on the next video, and happy planting.